All right, going live. There we are. Okay, hey guys. John Arvosis here with Josh. Let me, as always, check a few of the services. Substack. Okay, Substack's going to catch up. Instagram, great. YouTube is going to start right. There we go. That's the one. I've got to see if I can mute that one. Excellent. Ooh, we may be okay here. I was telling Joshua, our regular viewers know about our never-ending joy of technology. But I was telling Josh about it. It's always quite fun, as you guys know. But shockingly, the technology gods might be with us tonight because we are streaming all over the place. I think we got it. Let me pull up my... Of course, TikTok is the one that stopped on me. Of course it did. Are you kidding? See, this is what I love about this. TikTok, we were live. And as soon as I went live, it cut us out. All right, let's try it again. Sorry, Josh.
No worries.
All right, TikTok, I need to do a quick check here because now part of it is you have to then set it up with all of these different codes. And of course, all right, TikTok, where are you? All right, August 10th, TikTok. I'm going to just, here we go. You know what? New TikTok. All right, streamer key, server URL. All right, let's see if that does it. All right, hopefully, there we go. Oh my God, we're streaming on TikTok. Shock of all shocks. All right, that was the final thing I was worried about. TikTok, yay, the TikTokers are joining us. I can see them coming in. All right, guys, welcome. Thank God. John Arvosis here. We only had a small technical glitch. What a shock. Anyway, welcome, guys. John Arvosis here. I am here with Joshua Kolb. Joshua is a senior counsel at Democracy Defenders Fund. More importantly, he is one of the co-counsels for David Hearn, commonly referred to as the former Olympian, who Donald Trump, among others, accused falsely of vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Wanted to have Josh come on today, talk to us about the case. We've been talking about this a lot, Josh. I mean, for several weeks. As I've told you privately, I'm a lawyer, but a lot of our folks here aren't. So I sort of try to explain what's going on. Some of the stuff we'll get into. For example, they were asking me about with or without prejudice. The grand jury process, which of course is kind of crazy from our perspective on the outside, because it seems rather unfair. But we can get into that. But I think first, I would love you to start by maybe just in case there's anybody new watching, what is this case? What's the background?
Well, it's a crazy case. Thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here. Davey Hearn, as you mentioned, is an Olympian. He represented this country. He's a canoeist. And just like many other Americans, he went out to the reflecting pool in June to see what was going on. He was on a bike ride, which he does regularly. He went over to see what was happening at the pool. If you remember that time, there were all of this mess that was already beginning to accrue at the pool with the lining and the algae. Anyway, he was there just to see what was happening and put his hand in the water. Next thing he knew, he was being detained and arrested, held for quite a while. And then after a short bit of time was shockingly charged criminally, was charged with a felony for destruction of property over $1,000 by U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, in the D.C. Superior Court. And this was ludicrous. I mean, obviously, we now know the department has moved and the court has granted their motion to dismiss the case. So the case does not exist as we sit here right now because the government didn't have the evidence to prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. From the day after Mr. Hearn was arraigned in D.C. Superior Court, we filed the first in a series of motions exposing the deficiencies in the charges against Davey, going through how the government knew or ought to have known that this was not true, that they had evidence that was exculpatory, that proved that he was not responsible for the damage that was being alleged even before they went to the grand jury. And so this is, from my perspective, and we can talk about this on a broader scale too, if you want. We've been at Democracy Defenders Fund, and personally, we've been involved in, in scores of instances in which the Department of Justice has now been weaponized against the president's political opponents and enemies, and has also now being used as an instrument to effectuate his political whims. What was that here? He had driven through this renovation project at the reflecting pool, which had gone disastrously wrong in what appears to be in no small part because they rammed through a no-bid contract, meaning that they didn't go through the typical process where different firms bid on competing on price, competing on quality. Instead, they just gave it to a friend of the president's from Mar-a-Lago, did a shoddy job, led to all these issues, and instead of taking responsibility for that, went off to blame an American, a patriotic American, someone who represented the country like Davy, and threatened him with 10 years in prison for doing nothing at all. So finally, the government faced up to what they would have to at some point in this process face up to, which is they didn't have the evidence to support these charges whatsoever, moved to dismiss the case.
Okay, now one of the sort of big shocking things that happened was week ago Friday, I think, because I was trying to take a small weekend vacation in Virginia, and I was like, I've got to do a video. It's 10 o'clock at night. Well, you were probably in the same situation.
True. It's very true.
The government filed the prosecutors, for everybody here, files a brief basically asking the judge permission to drop the case. Now, I was asking sort of some of the other folks who still practice law out here, Josh, and they were saying, I guess, is it with criminal cases, you need the judge's assent to actually drop a case?
Yeah.
Or something like that?
So in this instance in particular, we're operating under the local DC rules of criminal procedure because this is in the local DC court, the DC Superior Court. And once an indictment is brought under the relevant rule for this type of indictment, the government can move to dismiss the indictment with leave of the court. So they need the court's assent to do so. And so they filed this motion to dismiss the indictment, which the court would have to grant for it to be formally dismissed. The court then did so.
And this was this was a shocking document from the prosecutors because, well, and I want you to maybe explain this for folks, because at first glance, it looks like the prosecutors are saying, hey, the Department of the Interior knew this guy was innocent and they lied to us. That's why we indicted him. Sorry, not our fault. Tell us more about that and who really is to blame here. And are the prosecutors, are they free here?
So a few things going on there. First of all, you're right. It's just worth pausing on this point. This is a shocking document and it's a shocking move. This is an embarrassment for the Department of Justice to bring a felony case and then weeks later move to dismiss your own indictment is shocking. It's not something that happens typically. It's a real, pardon the pun, it's a real indictment of the Department of Justice right now, and that office in DC under Jeanine Pirro. And so that alone should be taken as a huge sign. We've seen this department move forward with bad cases, with cases where they didn't have evidence to support it. We've seen them bring criminal charges against people who shouldn't have had felony charges brought against them because they were political opponents of the president that were dismissed by the court. Here, the Department of Justice, on their own accord, went to the court and said, you know what, actually, this case is nonsense. We actually can't prove this case. So that alone is a shocking development. Yep. And then you get to the motion itself, which notably says that, contrary to what the president has been saying for months, the damage at the reflecting pool is not due to vandalism. It says that in black and white in the motion itself. It's not due to vandalism. It's due instead to shoddy work by the contractors. They say that. The Department of Justice now admits that.
Who were rushed in the job. I love that little addition.
Yes.
Because we know who that's referring to. That's referring to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Eventually, ultimately. Yeah. Yeah.
And he himself said, there was a rush to get it done before the 4th of July. I mean, he clearly,
he admitted that this weekend. Yep.
Yeah, he talked about that. So, the Department of Justice says, well, We didn't find out any of this until a couple weeks after we indicted, when all of a sudden the Department of the Interior says, we get all this information from them, and then we realize, oh no, this whole thing we did is wrong. It's not believable, frankly. I'll tell you, John, it's not believable. Going back to what I said earlier, from the day after he was arraigned, we filed motions, including a motion to dismiss. Right. Going through how the Department of Justice already had the exculpatory evidence. There were before and after pictures, before Davey touched the pool, after Davey touched the water, and it is literally looks identical. The lining of the pool looks the same. It's in black and white or in color, depending on how you look at it on the piece of paper. It's right there. And there's a series of other things we went through as well. So
let me jump in a second. Is it the prosecutor's job to make sure they're not prosecuting somebody who might be innocent? I mean, because we think of prosecutors going, well, if they think you might be guilty, is it their job to go after you, or no? If they've got evidence that says, look, this guy's probably innocent, they've got to stop.
They have an obligation not to do that. I mean, they cannot. That's not appropriate for a prosecutor to go, well, we don't think he actually did it, or we're not sure, but we're going to charge him anyway.
We got pressure from on top.
For whatever reason. I mean, it's pretty clear that there is a political calculation going on behind these charges. And, the prosecutors here did what they had to do. When they saw the overwhelming evidence showing they just this case could not stand up. They could not stand this case up. It was going to be an embarrassing loss for them before a jury. They did what they had to do, which is dismiss the case. It's not a case. I mean, it simply isn't. And prosecutors, like you're getting at, you can't try people because I'm not sure, but we'll just roll the dice. Maybe
my boss is putting pressure on me. I guess I'll go ahead. It's not okay. Actually, here's a question. My boss pressured me to file the indictment, to seek the indictment. Is that an excuse for a prosecutor in terms of legal codes of ethics and all these kind of things?
I mean, we'll get into. I'll say this in terms of the specifics of this case. Our focus right now is on ensuring the case is dismissed entirely and can never come back, and we can talk about that in a second. And then we'll pursue all remedies in terms of holding people accountable.
Okay. So your client
we're considering what remedies there are, and we're considering all of the possible remedies. We're considering them. We're not going to speak about them, and we haven't made any decisions yet because our focus right now is still on the dismissal stage of this and on the criminal stage of this. But it's an outrage. What happened to Davey is an outrage. Prosecutors cannot behave like this. You have the most awesome power that you can have as a lawyer. You have the power of the federal government behind you. You have the power to put people in prison. You have the power to remove their liberty. And you can't just willy-nilly use that when you don't have justification to do so. And this case should never have been indicted. It should never have gone to the grand jury. It should never have gone forward. It was obvious from day one that there was not evidence to support this beyond a reasonable doubt.
I want to get to the grand jury thing in a second. I want to ask you first about this because you've already kind of hit on it. So the document the prosecutors submit to the court a little over a week ago saying, oh, we screwed up. Let's throw the case out. Let's dismiss the charges. There's an inconsistency. My friend Matt, who's a lawyer as well, Matt and I have been talking about this. There's an inconsistency there. The prosecutors are claiming, sure, we always knew the reflecting pool was damaged before Davey got there, right? David Hearn, the Olympian. Before David got there, it was damaged. We thought it was vandals who got there before David got there. Now we know, and we have no idea. The Department of the Interior never told us that it was the bad job the contractor did that caused the damage before Davey got there. So now we're throwing the case out. To me, that sounds legally inconsistent. It doesn't matter who caused the damage before Davey got there. Davey either did or didn't commit a felony based on whatever legal standard. It doesn't. They already knew that the pond was damaged before, the pool was damaged before. Claiming that because it was the contractor, now we have to throw it out. That's bullshit. I'm sorry, but am I wrong about the inconsistency here? It's almost like they're giving a BS argument to the court. Is my point.
I mean, the whole thing is illogical, right? The whole thing is illogical. Everyone saw what was happening at the pool back before this happened, and in June. Right. Everyone saw Jonathan Karl doing his report at the pool from ABC. Everyone saw the algae that was forming, the tears that were forming, and everyone saw the president's explanations for it. And After the president said, "Oh, it's vandals," then all of a sudden people are arrested along the same theory. It's nonsense.
Right.
And what the Department of Justice has put forward now is, their explanation of how they've come to believe that they didn't have the evidence to support these claims. I can't speak to, what's in the prosecutors' minds or how they understood this. What I can say is that we've been consistent that there was evidence both in the public record and that the prosecutors had access to or ought to have had access to that showed definitively that Davey didn't do this. I mean, Davey's not responsible for this. And it's notable in the motion to dismiss, as you're getting at, it goes further than just that. It goes further than just saying Davey didn't do it. It goes to the point, the next level of saying, and it wasn't vandalism in all likelihood. It was actually this shoddy construction work, which is another level of explanation that whether maybe they had to, maybe they didn't have to. I'm not going to, again, speak to like their decision-making process on this. But yet again, what we're seeing is that it's so tenuous, it can't stand up. And this is consistently the issue that this department is running into.
Right.
Whenever they're faced in the cold, harsh reality of court filings, of the actual legal process playing out, which is there are a lot of difficulties we've run into and that this government has tried to push forward. But at the end of the day, there is a beauty to the fact that things are held into this objective standard in the court of law. It's why it's so important that we retain and keep fighting so aggressively in the court of law as we do. These things can't stand up. This didn't stand up. It's the latest example of it.
Let's get into the grand jury a little bit. Now, tell folks how grand juries work, because pretty much grand juries are not courts of law where you've got to present both sides and be very fair and all of this, right?
Yeah, that's right. So grand juries, it's just the prosecutors. The defense isn't there. The client, the defendant isn't there, and it's simply prosecutors presenting to a grand jury of people that they what they have, what their the evidence they have at this stage is, and what they're trying to do is to show that they have probable cause to bring an indictment. Now, first of all, that's a lower standard than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the lower standard than what they will actually have to prove at trial, number one.
Okay.
Number two, there's no cross-examination. There's no testing of the evidence. It is an uncontested presentation of the evidence to the grand jury.
Right.
In the history of prosecutions and how courts have worked, it is, classically the case that it's pretty easy to get an indictment out of the grand jury. It's you can indict a ham sandwich is the old phrase. Ironically, this office has had trouble getting indictments out of grand juries, which shows, what's been going on there. So that's kind of that. It's very different than what happens after an indictment goes forward. We currently have a motion that is still pending before the court to get access to the grand jury minutes in this case, and also to get access to the instructions that were given to the jury. Because from the not full amount of the transcript that we've seen so far, we've already seen issues and irregularities and inconsistencies that need to be explained.
Explain a couple of them, because I was going to mention them, but you know the top ones off the guy changing his testimony is huge. Actually, tell us about some of the inconsistencies.
So that's a very important one, and I think you're referring to the expert who gets up to talk about the damages element. And again, the charge that was brought against Davey was that property damage greater than $1,000. It had to be greater than $1,000 for it to be a felony. And the first time he gets up, he does not testify that it was greater than $1,000 explicitly. I mean, that's not what he says. He goes off the stand. All of a sudden, the prosecutors bring him back, and they ask him a question directly. Say, is it greater than $1,000? He says yes. And then the prosecutor says to the grand jury, well, that's all sewed up now. Yeah. I mean, that's all taken care of. We've solved that question.
Yeah.
Actually,
let me put a finer point on this.
Sure.
The guy testifies and says, basically, I can't put a monetary value on what this guy David Hearn did. They break for, I believe, 22 or 23 minutes.
Yes.
He comes back after only 22 or 23 minutes and says, Let me ask you again. Could you put a monetary value? He goes, oh yeah, well over $1,000. You sure? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what shocked me was the grand jury was actually seemed to be quite with it on some points. They were asking probing questions and all of that. Why? Well, I guess, do we know if anybody on the grand jury said, wait a minute, 20 minutes ago, you told us you had no idea, and now you did?
We're trying to get the full grand jury minutes
Okay.
because this is the kind of thing, this is, I think, the top, one of the things that raises a lot of questions and has a lot of smoke surrounding it. And so we moved to get the grand jury minutes before the Department of Justice moved to dismiss the case. We also moved to get the instructions that were given to the grand jury to understand if they were properly instructed as to what the law is here.
Right.
That's still pending before the court.
Let me ask you this. Why should the judge care about your pending motion to get the grand jury minutes? Your client's already, devil's advocate, your client's off the hook. She dropped the case. Why do you need to get grand jury minutes?
So there's a few things here. First of all, something we were kind of alluding to earlier, there's a level of prosecutorial conduct that is expected, right? And the court has an obligation to a certain extent. I mean, the court, we'll see what the court does, but the court at least has the option to probe into that issue. Prosecutors have, all lawyers before the bar. I do, any lawyer that operates before the bar, but especially prosecutors have particular obligations under the rules of procedure in the courts and under the ethics rules to operate at a certain standard. All of that, the grand jury minutes and what transpired there could speak to that. Second of all, and we can get to this in a second if you want, from our perspective, this case needs to be shut down definitively.
That's the question. Yeah.
So I will talk about that in a second, but to the extent that that's still an open and live question that we're actively briefing right now, before the next hearing at the beginning of September, the grand jury minutes again are a relevant piece of evidence in terms of understanding the bad faith of the government, which is part of what the court will need to evaluate.
Right. Okay. Right. And let's jump into it then. This goes, what Josh is talking about is the whole issue of, yes, the judge dismissed the case last week, but there is still this legal discussion going on between his team and the government's lawyers and the court as to whether the case is dismissed with or without prejudice. Explain to people what that means and maybe what the standard is we're looking at, or why one would do this with prejudice. What does that mean?
Sure. So the government moved to dismiss the case without prejudice. What that means is that even if the case is dismissed, which it now has been, the court has granted that motion, the case is no longer active. The government could bring the same charge against Mr. Hearn again, and they could do it again and again and again. There isn't a limit. Would
they need to go back to the grand jury for another grand jury?
Yes, they would need to go back before the grand jury. It's the same process, but they could keep bringing the case against him for whatever reason. And if they got a grand jury to bring an indictment, then we're back in this. We're doing this all over again. Right. We responded to the government's motion to dismiss. We said we agree the case should be dismissed against Mr. Hearn. Obviously, thank you for recognizing that. But the case needs to be dismissed with prejudice. With prejudice means that's it. You can't bring these charges against this defendant again. What the court has done is they granted the motion to dismiss. They dismissed the case and held the issue of with or without prejudice for a later date while we brief the issue. Because it's a very important point. What do we have to show to have the case dismissed with prejudice? We have to show that there's a risk of harassment against Davey, that there's a high risk that he could be charged again, that the government could harass him unjustifiably, and we have to show the good or bad faith of the government in their dealings here. And so we already began that process. We filed our first motion, our response to the government's motion on this, which goes through and catalogs why there is a significant risk of harassment, how the government has acted with bad faith, starting from the ongoing political pressure from the President of the United States. The day after the case, the government moved to dismiss the indictment against Mr. Hearn, the president and the secretary of the Interior immediately came out and said that they disagreed with Janine Pirro's decision. They disagreed that the case shouldn't have been indicted indictment shouldn't have been dismissed in the first instance. And as we were talking about earlier, John, we've seen the amount of pressure that the president can put on the department, and how the department moves in the direction that he wants. Often irrespective of the facts or the law, or at least, meeting the proper standards of those two elements. So this is it's kind of a technical legal issue, and the language is, not straightforward necessarily. But this is a crucial issue. And it's something that we're going to be fighting, and there's going to be a hearing at the beginning of September that will focus on this issue.
I'm a little confused as to the difference between harassment by the government and bad faith prosecution, because aren't they bad faith prosecuting him because Trump wants them to harass him? Isn't it the same thing? I'm a little confused as to what the difference is there.
They're interrelated. I mean, you would be harassed because of the bad faith of the prosecutor.
It's the vehicle of harassment is, hey, let's file charges against him.
And the point here is that the risk of harassment is, what is the risk that he will get that a defendant would get re-indicted once, twice, three times, purely, in order to harass the defendant.
Okay.
The bad faith speaks to the intent element, and it speaks to what the government has done so far and how that plays into
the quality of the underlying indictment itself, regardless of the motivation.
The quality of the underlying indictment, the behavior of the government or the prosecutors beforehand, if they have been acting in ways that show that they are, indicting or doing things like this not for the proper reason, which was because they believe that there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that that defendant committed the crime that has been charged, and they want to prosecute it. If they're trying to find ways around court decisions, all these different ways of showing that they're not being forthright and not doing their job the way it should be done, all of that goes towards that analysis.
Right. What haven't we hit on here? I'm trying to think like where else to delve in with this. Trump's comments. How helpful have the president's comments before, and especially this weekend, been to your team for your case?
Look, I mean, the president, it's clear what he thinks, and it's clear what he wants. I mean, he wants scapegoats to, cover up the fact that the contractor that his administration hired and the renovation job that was rushed through was a disaster. I mean, it was embarrassing, and it caused a mess before the 4th of July holiday. And so he's just interested in having scapegoats like that. It really is, what's happened here is really a quite picturesque reflection of the broader issues with this administration. We have corruption and incompetence sort of operating in tandem that leads to things going wrong, issues, whatever in this instance, it's something as simple as, the reflecting pool getting ruined. There are much bigger issues as well that affect millions of people that have been going on, that have been, gone wrong because of this combination of corruption and incompetence. And then instead of taking responsibility and taking blame for that and, doing the right thing, trying to fix it going forward, the president and his administration looks for people to blame and are willing to abuse the powers that they hold, including perhaps one of the most powerful tools that they have, which is the criminal justice process, to prosecute people, to try to shove blame off. It's a tragedy. It can't go on. It shouldn't go on. We will continue to aggressively push forward to ensure that it doesn't, for our client and for Americans all around the country. It's why we at Democracy Defenders Fund have been engaged on these criminal law issues in addition to the other litigation that we're doing. And so, again, like I said, we're focused on getting this case dismissed with prejudice, ensuring that it can never be brought again, that Davy is never put in this horrible situation again, which is truly a nightmare, to be faced with this kind of threat looming over your head. And then we will evaluate what, if any, steps we can take for there to be accountability.
Let me ask you generally, and if you can't get into some, I'm going to ask you generally, but if you can't get into it because it still could reflect on your case, I understand that. But, you're senior counsel with an organization literally called Democracy Defenders Fund. I'm going to presume that therefore these are the kind of cases and things that you get involved with. You were talking about, other people basically being attacked by the government unjustly for political reasons. Weaponization is the term the Republicans like to use. Ironically, it's something that they've been doing that really didn't happen to a significant degree under Obama or Biden, really. Can anything be done about this? I mean, hypothetically, and I really mean this, I'm not talking about your case, but generally speaking, are there laws in place to protect us from, let's say, prosecutors who go after you unjustly? If the president gets involved in the indictment process, which supposedly we're always told, oh, that's never allowed, is it not allowed? Or is it just, the culture has always been one doesn't, but if one does, oh, well, you're screwed. The president wanted to sick the FBI after you, and he did. Are there no checks and balances here? Or are these all political decisions, basically? I mean, I'm saying, like, as a country, this feels very scary.
Yeah.
Because we feel, I think, when we talk about it on the show, we feel like quite literally, if there isn't a political solution, there's no solution. Congress is controlled by the other guys, so the president could do whatever he wants, even when it seems like he's breaking what we thought was the law. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say this is a crisis moment for the rule of law, and it's a crisis moment for the country. We at Democracy Defenders Fund have been aggressively litigating. We have over 300 cases and matters since January of 2025. And what we've shown, though, is that we have won. We have won in court, and we've won in the court of law and the court of public opinion. Some of the cases that we've been involved with our partners and colleagues and co-counsel include, the Birthright citizenship case, which we litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court and won there with our colleagues.
Oh, you were involved with? Oh, that's right. Because you were involved with that. Okay, yeah.
Yes. And another instance of an individual who was wrongly targeted was Dr. Lisa Cook, who's a governor on the Federal Reserve Board that the Trump administration has tried to remove. And
wait, you've been involved with that too?
Yes, that is also.
See, I didn't do my due diligence on here. I apologize, guys. I was planning on talking all about Davey and had no idea you've worked on all the other stuff we've been talking about.
I mean, and it's Norm Eisen is our leader, and we have a huge team here at Democracy Defenders Fund as well, doing a lot of work. We've been working, along with 35 former federal judges, helped pry loose that slush fund case, the $1.8 billion that the Trump administration was trying to do in the slush fund, and stop that in its tracks. The Kennedy Center case, Donald Trump's attempt to rename the Kennedy Center. We won that case with our co-counsel, the same co-counsel we actually have on this case with David Hearn, the Washington Litigation Group. Right. And there are a bunch of others as well. That
are you involved in any of the other cases?
Yeah, I Democracy Defenders and myself were involved in those cases too.
Okay.
At various stages of the litigation. And what we've though shown is that when we litigate effectively and smartly and aggressively, we can win. And we can win in very important ways, ways that can really stem the tide of authoritarianism and corruption. So there is hope. There are things that we can do. And we talk about it as the court of law and the court of public opinion. Those are the two courts we're operating in. And so we've been talking for today about the court of law and the things that happen in terms of Davies' case and other cases that we can do. But as you talk about, the court of public opinion is also extremely important. And that's often where these things will ultimately be fought about. But I'll give another example if we have a moment, just in terms of the criminal stuff, because it's kind of what you're talking about also is we're seeing all this lawlessness across the board. And one of the things that was so troubling and unique about this case with Davey is that it was the abuse of the criminal justice system, right? It's not just there's an executive order that violates the law. We litigated that. The Birthright citizenship EO violated the law. We went to the Supreme Court. We won. What we're seeing here is the Department of Justice using actual criminal processes to go after political enemies of the Trump administration. So last year, we were involved in the case challenging Alina Habba's appointment as
Oh, right.
U.S. Attorney in New Jersey.
Right.
Myself and Norm and our colleagues and our partner co-counsel sort of developed a theory surrounding the illegality of her appointment, which was very important because why was he putting these people illegally in office? It's because they never could have gotten passed through the Senate, and he wanted them to do his dirty deeds.
Right.
And so we won that case first in the lower courts and then in the Third Circuit. And then a few months later, when Lindsay Halligan, who was also unlawfully appointed in the Eastern District of Virginia, brings cases against Tish James and James Comey, their counsel then bring motions to dismiss on the basis of the fact that Halligan shouldn't have been indicting them in the first instance.
and her name's on the brief, as I recall, or something as well. Yeah.
And apparently, if I'm recalling correctly, I think she personally went down to the grand jury.
I read some of the transcript that came out because she was really bad. I remember she wasn't quite sure what she was doing. She'd never done it before. And the judge at some point was it was almost like the comedy you see of like somebody like me representing myself in court or something when I don't know court. That the judge was having to kind of jump. Oh no, I remember this story now. It was very funny.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot of it's scary, but a lot of it's also.
It's funny. Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, to see some of the ways that the lawyers are now operating in court is quite amusing, particularly as a lawyer. But anyway, those cases were then dismissed based on the same theory that we kind of innovated on the Habba instance, even when that wasn't against a political enemy, quote unquote, of the president's. And so there's a lot we can do, and we're going to come up to the elections, and there's going to be a lot of, work that has to be done to ensure the elections are safe and free and fair and that there isn't any nefarious interference there. So that's on the litigation side. And then there's the court of public opinion, which I think, as you talked about, I'm sure your viewers as well, understand that's often where, as I said, that's often where these things will ultimately be fought out. And I think you see there that the president is not doing so well in the court of public opinion right now.
What I worry about is what? You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to be stopping him. Maybe it'll stop in 2.5 years, but right now, he's like, okay, you don't like I'm doing it? Great. Stephen Miller, do more.
Well, right now what we see is, so for example, Davey was indicted. He's no longer under criminal charges. Right. We've seen in a variety of areas where we've been able to stop them and areas where they've gone forward. And so that process will continue to play itself out. But what we've seen is that when we fight aggressively, when we don't give in to despair, that we win. More often than not, it's actually a quite impressive score of victories that we've been able to notch up. And in terms of Democracy Defenders Fund and Democracy Defenders Action, our sister organization, we really operate sort of on three main pillars, which is these rule of law issues, which is, Davey is first and foremost, is a great example of that. There are many others. The birthright citizenship, that was against the Constitution to that executive order, and the Supreme Court ruled in our favor on that front. Corruption, fighting corruption, ensuring that we don't have a corrupt government, because corruption is, the kind of the grease way towards authoritarianism. And then protecting our elections, because you don't have a democracy if you don't have elections. And so those are the three areas that we're operating in most aggressively, both in the court of law and in the court of public opinion.
Can I ask you about election stuff? I didn't want to necessarily put you. I will tell folks. I told them we wanted to talk about Davey, our former Olympian accused of the reflecting pool, because I honestly had no idea you were into all these other issues, because these are the top issues we're always talking about. But up to you. Can we talk a little election stuff or not? I don't want to get totally off if you didn't prepare for that.
No, I think it's a little premature to talk, right now. I'm happy to come back and
okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Elections.
No, but you're making me feel a little better. Because I see you guys having some of these victories, and it sometimes feels like it's a random victory. And then a lot of times we're also worried about it going to the Supreme Court. Although on birthright citizenship, That went great. On tariffs, it went well. Trump is obviously making another stab at Birthright just in the last couple of days. So he's trying to see if he can get around the court and all of that. But yeah, that's sort of my fear, even the election stuff, and we can talk about it again later. But, to what degree, sorry.
The other thing I'll mention too is just, if people can put themselves back in the, mind frame of last year, last winter and spring, when you had Elon Musk in the government and DOGE, kind of rampaging through the government, we brought litigation against the destruction of USAID and USAID and DOGE. And, that whole initiative, it's as if Elon Musk was never in the government. And all of those things have kind of stopped in their tracks. And, this is an administration that keeps pushing forward and is sort of relentless, and they're in a variety of different areas. But there's a lot that they were trying to do that we've, not just us, but so many other organizations that are working diligently and tirelessly to push to ensure that we have, a lawful and democratic country, have really been able to stem the tide on. And so there really is a balance there that's important to sort of take a step back and recognize. And obviously there are things that are frustrating and things that are continue to push forward. But if they're going to keep doing things that are illegal, we're going to continue to challenge it.
And clearly, on its face, it's sort of, the answer is on its face because we know the success you guys have had. But clearly, you're not, I don't want to say concerned, but again, one of the concerns we've had is we look and we win in a district court, a lower court, and we think, well, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, they're going to screw us. It's Trump people, it's the Trump court, blah, blah, blah. But clearly that's not been your experience so far, meaning we've had a few victories that have been really significant, which is great.
Yeah, look, obviously the Roberts Court has issued some awful decisions. Starting with the immunity decision, not starting with, but the immunity decision is quite notably, from my perspective at least, pretty atrocious.
Just 20 seconds to tell people what that is that you just referred to. What is the immunity decision?
This is the case where the Supreme Court essentially ruled that the president, for a quote unquote official acts, which still needs to be defined, essentially has immunity from criminal prosecution for any official acts. This is a case that emerged in the wake of the Jack Smith prosecution against Donald Trump for January 6th. And that was a terrible decision that opened the door to impunity for the president. And there have been, this court has done a lot of damaging things. There's no way of avoiding that whatsoever. And we're deeply concerned about that. I think anyone who's watching them closely is deeply concerned about that. But, what we've been able to do is we've been able to litigate successfully at the court in the majority of our cases for a variety of different reasons. But on Birthright, on Lisa Cook, on other cases that have been going on there, it's part of the balance of understanding how to deal with the court, understanding the different things at play in these cases. So, we're going to continue to fight. That's kind of our mandate.
Right. Kennedy Center, got to ask you, is the case done, or do we still have a chance of getting that tarp removed? Is the case still going on at all?
We'll see. We'll see what the next stages are. I think we're in a period of we'll see what the next stages are in that case. Our client, Representative Beatty, we had a tremendous victory in terms of the name and in terms of where things stand right now. I think the tarp is a pretty telling symbol of.
It's symbolic. It's honestly, I almost feel stupid bringing it up because we're talking about American citizens being thrown in jail for political reasons, which is obviously much more serious. But for so many people, the Kennedy Center renaming became such an important symbolic thing. And I really mean it. I think it's a very deep thing in some ways. It's not, we don't like him, we don't want his name on the Kennedy Center. There's something almost obscene about it in that kind of authoritarian way. That it's emblematic of the entire strategy they're taking legally across the board.
For sure. First of all, the Kennedy Center was a memorial for a slain president. It's not just a frivolity that it's named the John F. Kennedy Performing Arts Center. It's the memorial for John F. Kennedy, first of all. Second of all, it was against the law. Whether it's frivolous or serious, you can't violate the law just because you want to put your name on things. And third of all, it is kind of part and parcel of this, broader authoritarian move to change the architecture of the nation's capital, to slap the president's name on as many things as possible, whether it's legal or illegal. And that's something that we thought it was important to challenge it. And I think that this is just me speaking personally. I think the tarp up in front of the Kennedy Center is quite a humiliating thing that, to have just sitting there as a memorial of your inability to, slap your name on this performing arts center.
It's a security blanket. I was comparing it to Linus and Charlie Brown with the security blanket. It's this little blanket that's up there kind of keeping him safe because it'll be embarrassing. I mean, the thing is, it is embarrassing. That's the whole point. Well, we know this. I mean, he acts like a child, but, so let's go. We can go. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you. And I would love to get you to come back to talk about the election stuff when we get closer, and some of these other cases too, frankly. But we'll warn you in advance when we get into that. But back to David Hearn, the former Olympian. We've been talking, and just to remind folks, I always forget. I should treat this more like radio, that people come in and leave. We should have been reminding folks. This is Joshua Kolb, who's with the senior counsel at Democracy Defenders Fund. He is one of the co-counsels for David Hearn, who's the former Olympian who Donald Trump and others allegedly or claimed falsely had, vandalized the reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial. And they've had a big victory last week in court with this. So do we have any sense of the timetable about what's next? You guys are litigating over whether you can get the judge has dismissed the case, but whether you can get it dismissed with prejudice, meaning the prosecutors can never bring it back against him. Somebody the other day compared it to double jeopardy, which, it's different, but the same concept in a sense, like you had your chance and now you're done. What kind of timetable might we be looking at to hear more from the court on that?
So we've set a briefing schedule, and there will be a hearing in this case. The next hearing will be on September 4th.
That's what I thought,
And so we will be in court arguing about this prejudice issue, among other things. And so that's the next stage in this case. We'll brief the issues even as much as we need to throughout the rest of the month. And then on September 4th, we'll be in court before the judge arguing this.
So in principle, after the September 4th hearing, the judge may reach a decision because they've had the briefs already. They've had you guys in court to, face off against each other. So possibly a decision could be shortly thereafter?
That's right. Okay.
It'll be at the unless there's some other issue that comes up and the judge says, I want you to brief again. Yeah.
It'll be at the judge's discretion, but I think that's right. He'll have all of our briefing on it. He'll have our perspective. He'll have the government's perspective. And then we'll argue it in court. And then I think, the judge may shortly thereafter issue a decision, and we'll hear further from him in court the next time we're there.
Okay. And then the final point here, which you had already basically said earlier, but not committal, of course, but that once the judge has decided whether this case is dismissed permanently, meaning with prejudice, that the government cannot come after him again, then you and your co-counsels and David Hearn himself, your defendant, your client, will get together and decide whether you think there is anything further that should be done or can be done legally to either make Davey whole, or to punish those involved and send a message, whatever. Can I ask you generally, though, how, I know this from law school, but, that's about as far as it goes. Generally speaking, it's hard to sue the federal government, meaning not I'm suing you because you put a new land restriction on me. I mean, you went after me vindictively with an indictment you never should have done, that you knew you shouldn't have done. And this is criminal what you did to me. I'm going to sue you. Generally speaking, that is very limited, whether you can do that legally. Could you maybe explain just for a quick second the Federal Tort Claims Act, or whatever it is that I'm talking about, as far as how easy is it to sue the government if you think Donald Trump's come after me and it was wrong?
Yeah, it's a great point. And putting Davey and his case aside.
That's it. This is more generally, in general, for people that have been wronged by the Trump administration. Can they just sue him and say, I want money, I want you punished? You know.
So it's a great question. It is hard to sue the federal government. It just so happens that there is another case I've worked on that Democracy Defenders has worked on precisely on this issue, which, as you say, is the Federal Tort Claims Act. That is the law by which you have been given the ability to sue federal government officials for wrongdoing. Generally speaking, there's an immunity, there's protections for the federal government, but there is this this is one of the paths forward, the Federal Tort Claims Act, which is the FTCA. And so one of the cases that I've brought along with our co-counsel and Norm and Democracy Defenders Fund is, and another one of our clients is one of the individuals, the Venezuelans who was wrongfully sent to Sicat in El Salvador, is one of our clients. And last year, we filed the first Federal Tort Claims Act case for wrongdoing around those removals from the United States to Sicat in El Salvador. And we're currently litigating that case right now.
Have you gotten beyond the point where the court decides whether, in fact, you've met the burden that the case can go on?
So there's a time delay here that's involved. So you file the claim, and then you have to wait 6 months before you can go to court.
Oh, funny. Okay.
The government gets a lot of legs up here in this process.
Right.
And in that 6 months, the government has the opportunity or the option to settle the case. They can reach out and say, you know what, we acknowledge, we settle the case. Or not. If they don't
create a victims compensation fund. I hear that's kind of the latest thing to do.
Yeah, that's been in the news lately for some reason. There's a lot of money seeming to flow around.
Exactly.
Anyway.
But no, so are you still in the 6 month wait now, or is that over?
So there's 6 months. They have the opportunity to settle or to deny or to reach out. And if they don't do anything after that, you can sue in federal court. The government in this instance did not do so. We passed the 6 month window. And we have now filed our case in federal court, and that's where it's currently sitting. And so we're actively litigating it right now.
But is there not, I assume there's got to be some process in the court where at the beginning the court decides, have you even met the burden put out in the Federal Tort Claims Act that says most of you cannot sue, but you have proven that you're one of the ones who can sue? Is that not one of the first steps?
So if the government in all likelihood will re-up a motion to dismiss, then the issue
they will argue that you haven't met the burden under the law, and then you will try to prove it, and then we see what the judge says.
They may.
Okay. So we're not even at that point yet. Okay.
We're not at that point yet. We're still fighting over a venue, and so there may be that. So that's where things stand right now. We're actively litigating it as we speak.
Okay, this is great. Any final point on David Hearn's or any of the other issues? Otherwise, I will let you go. Like I said, you've been really generous. I wasn't sure how long you could give us, so thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. This has been a delight. No, it's just he is obviously relieved that the specter of prison has been lifted off his head. It's very harrowing to have the president of the United States talking about that you should spend 10 years in prison. That's not something to be taken lightly.
Has he been facing personal harassment over this as well? I would imagine people usually do when Donald Trump names them.
It's not a good situation. I mean, there's a reason that this is not something that ought to happen. I mean, the president shouldn't be targeting individuals. Individuals shouldn't be charged criminally when they haven't done anything wrong and they're innocent and there isn't evidence to support those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And so for those reasons, while Davey is relieved, he's also concerned. He's concerned about what happened to him. He's concerned that this could happen to other Americans as well. If it can happen to him, it could happen to others too. And so, it's a concerning moment for our country that this is what's going on with the Department of Justice. But that's why we have only redoubled our efforts, if that was even possible, at Democracy Defenders Fund to keep fighting on behalf of Davey and on behalf of the rule of law writ large.
Tell people how they can sort of, if you have a social media presence, where they can find you or at least your organization online. Where would they go to? Can they follow you guys on social media and stuff? Or
100%. I should actually pull up their handles. But we're on all the social media places on Instagram and Blue Sky and Twitter at Democracy Defenders Fund or Democracy Defenders Action.
Okay.
If you look that up, you'll find it. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter as well at Joshua G. Kolb is my handle on a variety of those platforms. And we're very active there. And folks should definitely check out our organization's social media stuff, because we're talking about all of the variety of cases and matters and complaints and lawsuits and calls for investigations and all the other things that we're doing on a variety of fronts on a daily basis.
No, this is great. Well, I was going to, and I thought of not saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm very glad that Norm couldn't be with us today. But no, because I don't know Norm, but we know each other like via Twitter for years. It's one of those weird Washington things where you go, where I don't know whether I call him a colleague or what. But I'd reached out to Norm and he was leaving for vacation. He said, "Would you mind talking to one of our co-counsels?" And I was like, "Hell no, that would be great." But this has been amazing. I mean, no, I think you've explained this so well for folks, and frankly, given a little bit of hope, which is really nice to hear, because I do this work too. I mean, in the sense that I've always keep fighting, and you try to stay hopeful, but lately it's been hard to sort of keep that going, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant push and pull. I think that's right. But we try to show the light, and that there are so many examples throughout history and throughout contemporary examples. You just look at Hungary, for example, of being able to turn around authoritarian backsliding. It is something that's not just possible, it's happened, and it's happened in the present moment and throughout history. And so continuing, protecting the rule of law is a really important pillar in that, both as defensively to protect it, but also being on offense and to go forward to take affirmative steps in defense of the rule of law, in addition to
now, okay, last question, maybe. Unless you guys act more like an ACLU type organization where you look for specific cases to fight large, important issues, will you be involved at all towards whether it is, if there are significant changes in Congress, whether there is a significant change in the presidential administration? Will you guys be involved at all at trying to formulate what do we do as I was thinking when you said Hungary, how do you stop it from happening again is such a huge issue. And I think for a lot of us, we're freaked out right now, and we're freaked out as to how this even happened. But we're also thinking, is there any way for it to stop it, whether it's reforms of some kind, so that a next bad man or woman is not able to come in and take advantage of so many loopholes we didn't know existed in the system?
Yeah. It is. It's something.
Or are you guys more lawsuits, or will you guys be involved to some degree trying to figure out systematically what do we need, or systemically what do we need to do in terms of whether it's legislation or what to make sure these things don't happen again?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very important issue, and it is something that we'll be involved with. And something
you will be. That's why I was just curious. I'm not asking for your answer today. And what do you plan on doing, Josh, to save us? But no, it's such a huge question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. But that's because you got to get it passed through Congress.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, there's investigations, there's reforms, there's congressional reforms, there's executive actions. There's a variety of different tools and levers depending on what is at your disposal. That we are thinking about those issues, because it's really important. You raise a very important point. It's both protection and defense, and also winning in these battles of the court of law and the court of public opinion, and also it is about rebuilding. And it's it's something that we actively think about in terms of what it means to have a vibrant and healthy democracy. It's not just a defensive thing; it's also a affirmative building, positive movement too.
Okay, thank you. So this is great, Josh. Thank you so much for coming and
just to do my org good. I have their handles now. If people would like to find them,
sure.
I finally found them both on Twitter and I think on Blue Sky. On Twitter, at least, it's at. There's two. There's at DD Fund _
DD Fund _ Okay.
Yes. And then at DD Action _
Okay.
And I think on Blue Sky, it is Democracy Defenders Fund and Democracy Defenders Action.
Okay.
But if you search it, you'll find it. We have a website. I mean, we're out there. So
Yeah.
you definitely find it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I appreciate it. This has been great. Thank you.
My pleasure. This was great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.
Take care.
I love this. Kick from studio. He's kicked. I'm looking at my setting. I did this have happened once before. We had a guest where I had no idea how to get rid of the guest. And I was like, help. Anyway, that was so freaking fascinating. That was great. No, and I'm so glad he was able to spend an hour with us because I wasn't sure how much time he had. And I always feel bad with lawyers, you don't want to take too much of their time, but that was amazing. Yeah. So that was, he was saying you can look him up. He's on Twitter and all the social media stuff. His organization is as well. The organization is Democracy Defenders Fund. So Democracy, singular, Defenders, plural, Fund. So you can Google them. And he is Joshua Kolb, Kolb. So you can, oops, my eye's itching. So you can Google him as well. Josh, it goes by Josh, I believe, but Joshua Kolb, Kolb. Really interesting. Yeah, no, I did not realize he was involved. I knew that he was working on David Hearn's case, who's the former Olympian, quote unquote, who Trump and everybody was accusing of vandalizing the reflecting pool. And that case blew up in Trump's face about a week and a half ago. But I was not aware that he had worked on, and his organization has worked on, Birthright, citizenship, the Kennedy Center, the Trump appointing the U.S. attorneys around the country, like what's her face, Haba, and the one in Northern Virginia that they appointed incorrectly, illegally. I'm trying to remember what I say. Birthright, Lisa Cook. Oh my God, Lisa Cook. Lisa Cook is the Federal Reserve case. I mean, we talked about it the other day because Trump yet again has started to go after her. He's trying to get rid of one of the heads of the Federal Reserve. Well, at this point, honestly, she's a black woman. I mean, Donald Trump, but he also was trying to go after her because he's trying to get more control of the organization because he thinks the Federal Reserve and monetary policy in America should be set according to Donald Trump's political whims, which is an incredibly dangerous thing. Monetary policy has got to be independent for an economy to function and for business to feel comfortable investing in an economy. So very dangerous stuff Trump is doing there. Anyway, wow. Well, we've been going an hour already, but I mean, I don't know if you guys, comments or anything. Otherwise, we could always end early too. I'm just shocked that the technology worked because I was very worried. We're streaming this on TikTok too, and I'm guessing TikTok, maybe mods, you can tell me later. I'm assuming TikTok probably had fewer viewers than normal because of the way the streaming works. But that's good. That's why I wanted to make sure we got ourselves on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and, oh my God, LinkedIn. We're on everywhere today, just so we'd be able to have a little bit of a broader audience. And a number of the services like Facebook, the video will be there for a month. YouTube, it'll be there permanently. So there's good places to have people can go and check out the video again, which is good. Yeah, he's really interesting guy. And what I like is he's very understandable, right? Like, I worry when you get into legal stuff that you're like, okay, you guys are an interesting combination. I suspect you're a rather educated audience, but at the same time, you're probably not all lawyers. Probably a lot of you are not, the majority of you are probably not lawyers. So that you get into this weird thing where, right, you need somebody who can explain things to a smart audience, but an audience that are not lawyers. So you've got to be able to say, okay, what is this? What is that? And he's very good at that, which is nice. Yeah. No. Anyway, very good. How old is he? I don't know. It's funny though. I got this too. He could be in his 20s. I have no idea. I got that too. I was working on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Senate, and I graduated from law school and graduate school. I did a joint degree at Georgetown when I was 25. And all the time I would get from people, they would look at me and go, "You're a senator's aide?" I actually had one woman at a dinner party say that. She goes, "What have you done to be qualified as a senator's aide?" And what do you do at that point, right? You have to do it. And I was like, well, and I went boom, 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 boom. And she goes, okay. Well, actually, no, she said, and it was even worse. She goes, a foreign policy aide, because you guys know my background on foreign policy stuff. And I was like, well, and she went, Okay, sorry. You know what? That's a good background. I was like, thank you. But you get it when you look young, you know, you get that. I always tell people who look young, like it sucks when you're in your 20s and 30s. As you get older, it's nice to look young. but when you're in your 20s and 30s, people assume you're new to it all. So they think you don't have much experience. You know, actually, I should have even said he's in his 20s. He could be in his 30s for all we know. You know, but yeah, in any case, yeah, served as a law clerk on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. I did see that. Yep. Very interesting. Anyway, he's 26. Get out. Is he that young? Son of a bitch. I'm jealous. Is he flying medic? Is that for real? You never know, because like he comes across, I mean, he clearly seems young, but you know, he could be 38. You know, it doesn't matter his age, obviously, because he's great at this, but it's always interesting. Anyway, anything else, guys? Like I said, we can hang a few more minutes. Otherwise, you know, a couple of minutes we would have hung up anyway. Our usual 7:15 cutoff. But anything else? But we definitely have to get him back. Hopefully he's willing to come back. But you know, talk of the election stuff for sure. These other cases, I had no idea. I mean, I hope he'll come for more. I'm going to ask him. Yeah, no, this is great. Like I said, I actually, what I need to do is pay more. You know what it is? I know Norm Eisen's been involved with a ton of this stuff. Norm is head of their organization. He ran Crew for a while, I believe. Goes on CNN. Like I know Norm from seeing him on CNN a lot too. So Norm is really out there. So I guess I did know Norm has been involved with a number of these cases. I never put it all together though, like all the individual cases. It's kind of amazing. Well, you know, I would say he's easy to interview. I have found, and I try not to, but it's hard. I find that sometimes if guests ramble, you've got to jump in at some point to redirect them, because you can't let a guest talk for 5 minutes if they're kind of off on a tangent. It's boring. He's a very good guest in that regard. He stayed on topic, was very interesting. He never brought up anything that I thought, oh, nobody cares about that, right? There was only once or twice where I wanted something explained or whatever. So I said, oh, you know, could you maybe explain this? But that was once or twice. He's just a very good guest in that regard. Yeah. Which is nice. So it made it easy to interview him, because it wasn't, you know, I mean, I literally had, you know, 6 pages of questions. I kid you not, just to be safe. And I had to look at my notes once or twice, because I got a little worried halfway through. I was like, do I have more questions? But obviously we had ample stuff. But I think that's when he started mentioning the other cases they worked on. And literally I went, the only thing is, it wouldn't be fair to put him on the spot and ask him about all those other cases, since he didn't really prepare to talk about them. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to do that to him. That's why I kind of mentioned it obliquely about the election stuff. And he said, yeah, let's do another show on that. So that's fine. You know. Oh my God. Anyway, very fun. Very fun. Oh, Norm is great. Norm cracks me up. Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, I think we can maybe wrap it up. I have nothing else to talk about. Obviously, I didn't prepare anything else for today, because obviously, what's funny, I was clipping stories all day, but nonetheless, actually, Wednesday, I am flying to Arizona for the week, and we're just going to see what I do out there. I may do a couple lives. I haven't decided yet. I'll definitely try to keep doing some news videos during the day, but I haven't decided on the lives. There's a chance I don't do any lives at all. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm here tomorrow though. Tuesday, I'm obviously here. So I'll be here tomorrow, 6 o'clock Eastern, the normal regular time. I know we had a quick rainstorm. It's over now, but we had a nice sort of solid rainstorm for like the last hour or so. That was it. There you go. And Irene says she did the sloppy joes on the hot dog bun. Like I said, thank you. Sloppy joes on a hamburger bun they're sloppy. They make a mess everywhere. On a hot dog bun, they stay. It's something I discovered. They stay in place, and you can even put cheese in there, and the whole thing stays in place. I hate sloppy food. It grosses me out. So, Iran waiting until 2028 to negotiate. I wouldn't be surprised. Trump is screwed on the negotiating stuff. Absolutely screwed on Iran. I mean, it's a mess. But what do you do? That's its own. Anyway, I know sloppy joes. I've got a great recipe for sloppy joes, by the way. They're very easy and very good made at home. The key ingredient is basically a green pepper. Green peppers are what give sloppy joes that little bit of a different flavor. It's bizarre. It's a green pepper.
So otherwise, it's pretty easy. It's what you think it is. It's ketchup, you know, little sugar. I can't remember what else now, but Worcestershire. You know, it's very simple. It's very good. Anyway, as we do our usual jumping around various topics at the end of the show. If you can't deal with green peppers, that's a problem. Yeah, that's funny because that literally is the underlying flavor from a sloppy Joe. Because like when you make it with the green pepper, then you eat it and go, oh yeah. You can eat it without a green pepper, though it's a little different, you know? Another heat wave in the UK. You guys are nuts with the heat in Europe. Absolutely crazy. I don't know if my sloppy Joe recipe is on Discord. I can put it up if I remember. Like I said, it's a very good recipe, but I don't know. I can look if I've got it handy. I might have it handy. Let me see. And then we can finish with that. Let me see here. Boom. It's a very good recipe. I really like it. Oh, sloppy Joe recipe. That's funny. I had it just the other day. It's sitting right here. Hold on. Let's see. Oh, that's not too long. I can show you this. Yeah, I can show you this. Here's my sloppy Joe recipe. So screen, is it in focus? Because sometimes this doesn't go in focus. Is that in focus enough? Somebody tell me yes or no if it's in focus. Because this doesn't always focus very well when I try to put this up with the camera. It's not in focus? Is it focusing or not enough? No? Yeah, it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna, that's not focusing, is it? Or, oh, that might be focusing. Is that focusing or not? Well, of course it's small. That's not the question, I guess, but no? All right. Try to grab the screen, and the rest of it's pretty obvious on its face. Just grab the screen, and then, you know, how to prepare it is pretty freaking easy. I mean, you can imagine, you cook the meat, you put the stuff in there, you cook the meat, you saute the vegetables, you put it all together, and then you boil it for, you know, you cook it for maybe 10 minutes to cook it down without a lid. It's how you cook it's pretty easy. Look at any sloppy Joe recipe for how to cook it. What's important are the proportions of food. Cooking, it's easy. Just look for any sloppy Joe recipe. Once you cook the vegetables, you put the meat in, you put the sauce, and then you usually simmer it for 10 minutes or until it's thick enough. At that point, you're not really cooking it. You're just cooking it to thicken it enough that you'd go, oh yeah, that would fit on a bun. And that's all you do. So I wouldn't be surprised, Flying Medic. Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys. I am going to sign off here, I think. And we will come back tomorrow. All right? All right. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. I will see you all mañana, 6 o'clock Eastern time, US. We'll be here, our regular show. And then, like I said, rest of the week, God knows. With me traveling, who knows? But yeah, that was fun. That went very well. I'm very happy. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. All right. I'm slowly disconnecting here. All right. Let me get my oh, Instagram cuts off at an hour. I forgot about that. I think it cuts off at an hour, yeah. Oh, there's that. There we go. Or maybe my Substack cut off. Oh no, my Substack might have cut off. That's interesting. Okay, weird. Maybe Substack did cut off. All right. I'm going to end the stream here. Bye, guys.